Welcome to the Marathon Investigation Podcast, where we discuss and debate the latest news regarding course cutters, bandits, and bib mules.
Hey, this is Derek Murphy on the Marathon Investigation Podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, Scott Coomer. Scott, say hi.
Hey, everybody.
Great to have you. Again, how you doing today, Scott? Anything new? Anything you want to talk about before we get started?
Just working hard, staying out of trouble, releasing some podcasts for 10 Junk Miles. Got a girl coming up tonight that finished her first 100-miler after 4 tries, and we had a really good chat. So other than that, business as usual.
Very good. I'm working on some new content related both to the podcast and to the I just wrote an article about the Chinese marathons, all kinds of issues. It seems like daily coming up with some of the Chinese marathons with the course cutting video from the traffic cams. A woman took one of the community rental bikes to finish. And I think part of that's due to the fact that the Chinese companies and corporations really strongly encourage people to take place in races that maybe they don't, that's not prepared for. So I think that's and the expectations and the cultural thing. So I think that's kind of interesting. So working on that and as well as some other stuff. So we'll get right into it. Today I have Jonathan Kane on with us. And John has been a running coach for over 20 years, and he was featured in Runner's World for catching cheaters before I was. Actually, probably about 4 or 5 months before I was, but he's been doing that for a long time. As a running coach, he would check the results of his runners and check above, and he'd find people who cut the course or bib swap to get ahead of his runners. And so he was kind of doing the same thing I was on a smaller scale. So we'll let him explain that to you. Hey, John, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So talk about, again, you're kind of the precursor to me, and you're probably what Scott wishes I was, where you kind of catch the cheaters, you report them, you're not publicly, you never really publicly outed any of these people. So kind of explain what got you started doing that.
Sure. It, as you said, I mean, it's very similar to what you're doing, but it's certainly on a smaller and admittedly less sophisticated scale. And it started mostly just as an opportunity to advocate for some of my athletes, who sometimes would get cheated out of an award or something like that because of someone, at times because of course cutting, at times because of bib swapping and things like that. But it also sort of piqued my interest, and I would start to dig even deeper. And then to me, I also just sort of became fascinated by the fact that so many race directors and organizations didn't seem to care much. And that was, which only then further fueled things for me, because I was sort of outraged, not just at the athletes who were cheating, but at the organizations that basically didn't seemed at all concerned by it.
Do you remember the first person the first cheater that you ever caught?
Yeah, it was actually at the Mardi Gras Marathon. I was down there with several of my athletes, and one of the women I was coaching came in 4th place in her age group. And after the race, I was just back. We were actually back in New York, and I was sort of sifting through the results and sort of looking at her race, which was a little bit more of a positive split than I had hoped, and, wondered, gee, where was she? Where did she lose the podium spot? And, where did she fall behind? And I was looking to see where she was at the halfway mark, and I noticed that the woman who ended up, one of the women who ended up in front of her at the finish was nowhere near her at the turnaround. And then I realized very quickly that, this woman was credited with a sub world record time for the second half. So that was a pretty obvious one, and was pretty easy. By the time I wrote to the race director, the timing company had already DQ'd her, and the race director and timing company contacted me and apologized and contacted the athlete. But yeah, so that was the first one, and that was the one that got me sort of thinking about digging deeper into these things at times.
Yeah, that story of how I kind of got started was very similar, where it was and we'll kind of backtrack to talk about Mike Rossi a little bit and, the Let's Run boards and how that fueled. But as that was kind of dragging on into the gutter, as it did for weeks and months and years, I said, why are we focused so much on Mike Rossi, one guy who cut a course to run Boston? Are there more people like him? So I literally did the same thing. I just pulled up, I think I looked on Marathon Guide and said, okay, hey, A1A Marathon was last week. I pulled it up, and the results were all listed on one page, nice and neat with the splits, so I can just scroll down. Same thing, missed split, big negative split. Then I went on Facebook, and I saw she took a picture at the 20-mile mark, so I had like another split where I could tell it was impossible. And it was like, it was literally 10 minutes from when I decided to look to where I found this result. And then her story was interesting. Then eventually, came out, she denied it. She claimed amnesia, turned her around. It was just kind of a crazy, interesting story. If it was something really dull, I may have just stopped. But, that was the same kind of thing. Was like, and I was the same way. I'm like, how is this person still in the results? It's super obvious. What's stopping them from removing her? So I started probably more anti-race director and timer than maybe I am today. I learned some of the stuff.
Why is it that like I've had a couple interactions with the race directors about cheating, and in both instances, the race directors were very hesitant to do anything, and almost, as an example, someone from my podcast at an ultra found out that a girl was using an illegal pacer in an ultra, and brought it up to the race director, and it turns out that the person did cheat, but the race director's whole attitude was to the person reporting, "Why do you care?" Why do you think there is some hesitancy to some of these race directors to get involved in these cases at all?
Yeah, I think, it's a great question, and it's one that I don't quite have a grasp on. I think some of it is just they don't want to make waves. And some of it, to me, the sort of irony, one of the things that we always talk about, or often talk about as being one of the great things about running is the sort of, the democratization of the sport. And that, look, I could have a company softball team. We're not playing in Yankee Stadium. But I can be a middle-of-the-pack marathoner and run the New York City Marathon with world-class athletes and all that stuff. And so, to me, those middle-of-the-pack athletes, those okay athletes like me, still have the same responsibility that the people who are, standing on the top step of the podium do to cover the distance. But I think, to a certain extent, some of the organizations just look at it and go, well, you know what? If it's not affecting the prize money, it's not affecting the awards, who cares? And although honestly, I've had cases where it did affect awards, where it did affect, fairly big races, and the organizations, the race directors or the race organizers were still reluctant. And sometimes I think it's politics. It's there was one in the Brooklyn Half a few years ago where it was a fairly well-known runner, and it was a big club in New York City, and I think they were just they probably just didn't want to make waves. And then, I think also they sort of dug their heels in that particular case. They dug their heels in, said, oh, no, nothing happened. And then even when presented with very obvious, evidence that the person cut the course, even when the person's team disowned him, they wouldn't change the results. So, yeah, I don't quite understand it, but I think it's just this, at times at least, it's a reluctance to make waves. And, I had the former... because I know the Philadelphia Marathon has a different organization now, but a few years back I had the organization when we pointed out women in an age group, two women, they took third and fourth in the age group and both clearly cut the course. And when contacted, they wrote back and said, the organization said, well, you know what, as long as it doesn't impact prize money or anything like that, we choose to focus on putting on a safe race, rather than disqualifying and embarrassing people, as if those two are mutually exclusive, as if you can't put on a safe race and also get the results accurately.
Yeah, I had the Philadelphia. That's one that I'm always harsh on. And really, 2 years ago, it seemed like they did a good job. They moved people, everyone who I thought should. Then last year and this year, so far, it's only been a few weeks since the race. But yeah, last year there's some very obvious ones who remained in the race with Boston qualifying times. The one that I had, kind of focused on, where it was extremely obvious that she basically what happened was her boyfriend ran the first half with her bib, and then she finished it out. And
Charming.
She took pictures that were posted on Facebook after the start of the race, saying she was there. That she took those down, which to me I could see maybe being a lag in posting a picture with everyone on their cell phone before a race, but by taking that down is kind of damning. And then the same exact splits to the second, for the first half of the race. And then she's in no photos. He's in photos, but without her. If they were running together, you'd see them both. So it was very obvious, and they wouldn't disqualify her. I'm like, well, the city could get sued. That was the reaction of the timer. And they have, in course cutting at Philadelphia, they don't have a published mat at the turnaround, but they do have a cheater mat. They have a non-published timing mat there where they have the data that could show where people cut the most obvious portion, but they don't seem to do anything with it.
Right, which is always what bewilders me is that some of these organizations, they'll pay to have the extra mat, but then they ignore the data that's generated from it. So why even bother?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Philadelphia is one that bugs me. We've got Honolulu coming up very soon, and that's one they went as far as hid the results. So
I remember.
Them. We'll see if they're up this year. I got them last year anyhow, but so it might be tougher this year because they were up for a time where you couldn't pull up everything at once, but you could get to it, and so I was able to get those. But then they took them down altogether. So that was interesting. So backtrack a little bit. I'm going to kind of talk on letsrun.com and kind of how we first got to know each other, and maybe even before then. So you started, how long ago did you say it was when you first kind of started at the Mardi Gras Marathon? What year was that?
It's got to be more than 10 years ago by now. It's I think that was off the top of my head, probably 2006, 2007, something like that.
So that may have been right around the Kip Litton time. Were you following the Kip Litton story? Is that what
Kip Litton was probably a little after that. Certainly, I was sort of deep into it by then. And the Kip Litton one, I remember I was actually working a training camp out of the country at the time, and I remember when that hit the Slow Twitch message boards and just blew up. And I mean, that one is still one of the most fascinating cases. I mean, it's just bizarre the lengths to which he went. I mean,
I want to have
on fake races and stuff.
Yeah, I want to have the guy who did the study of Kip Litton. I know he emailed me at some point. I was digging for that email and I couldn't find him. I'd love to have him on because he had he had a website and had probably more data, as many stories as I have on mine, just on Kip Litton. And
he was brilliant.
Yeah, no one still quite figured it out. He was never caught red-handed, but everyone knows he cheated. So that was the first kind of big cheater thread on Let's Run, and I was following that. I wasn't involved. I was just kind of following it like the soap opera. And then along came Mike Rossi, which, funny, I'd kind of been out of it for a while. I said, I wonder if anything else happened with Kip Litton. Went to look for a Kip Litton thread, and I see this Mike Rossi thread right on top of the message board, and I got sucked into that pretty deep, and kind of a little bit right after everyone was checking every single photo, and I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. Basically, I think anyone listening to this probably knows who Mike Rossi is, but he was a runner. He was he wrote the letter to the principal when he took his kids out of school to watch him run Boston, saying, and the school sent the form letter saying it was an unexcused absence. He posted a letter that he never sent to the principal on Facebook, and that went viral. He was Dad of the Year. He was on the Today Show and everything else. Well, turns out all evidence shows that he cheated in order to enter Boston, and so that's where the thread started, and then it kind of just continued down the gutter, really. There were local people who knew him and didn't like him. He was a wedding DJ, and there was some wedding DJ wars going on. It got ridiculous pretty quick, and I think Jonathan's probably I know that's when I kind of, I grew fatigued of it pretty quickly. When I didn't care if he was, about his DJ business or anything else. But a lot of people use that as a way to kind of get back to him. And granted, I'm not saying it's not undeserving. He, didn't respond in the best of ways either. But so then I think from that, I believe you were in somebody created a Facebook group that was kind of an offshoot of the Let's Run. I think, were you in that one?
Oh, yeah.
I'm ssure you were. I think with the whatever it was called, Race Street Investigation. So it's basically a way to non-publicly kind of look at it, and nothing you said, it was just, it got derailed. So that's where I really first knew Jonathan. At that point I was just doubler on Let's Run, wasn't public. I think I started the blog at that point, but I was still anonymous. My name wasn't tied to it. And then we, went there. But real quick what are kind of your thoughts on Mike Rossi? Not so much, did he cheat, but as far as just how that all kind of devolved, and that was kind of, it's definitely a key case of shaming the runner, but he put himself in the public spotlight, and he was
Yeah.
But out there, what's your whole thoughts on that, just in general, and how that went?
You used the perfect word. I mean, it devolved. It got so ugly, and it was a case where, I think, things just got worse because he kept doubling down. And rather than saying, wow, you know what, it was a real horrible lapse in judgment on my part. I was trying to do something positive. I was trying to set an example for my kids, whatever, which still would have been ridiculous. But the fact that he just kept denying, that he then became at times really aggressive towards people. He was threatening people. And I mean, thankfully, in my case, he just blocked me on social media, and that was the end of it. But I mean, I know there were cases of him being far more aggressive, and so and it really, as you said, it just evolved. It got really ugly, and also, as you said, there were people who clearly had their own agenda, who had a gripe against him in the first place, and used that as an opportunity to further their argument. And it was just, it's funny. Some of these I'm sort of intrigued by. I even get a little bit of a kick out of it or whatever. That was one that just got ugly, and it was almost kind of sad. And especially, maybe it's just me as a dad who does try and set a good example for his son. And, without meaning to get too deep and as existential about it, like, it sounded at first like such a nice story. And here he was saying whether you thought it was the right thing or not to pull his kids out of school. He thought when he said, I was just trying to set an example for my kids and do something positive. And you're thinking, okay, well, at least his heart's in the right place. And then it turned out to be such a mess, and, certainly in showing his kids exactly the wrong thing, I suppose. It was just, that one kind of, it made me a little sad, to be honest with you.
That was that was my intro to Let's Run message boards. That was the first time I ever went there. I saw someone talking about that, and I went there and I looked at this, and then I thought, who are these people? And I think that, like, my big problem with Let's Run is it's so anonymous, and everybody has a handle, so you don't know who you're talking to. And it's very easy in that case to say the things that they say, especially from mocking someone's performance, like Sage Kennedy, it doesn't break 18 hours. And then someone's like, oh, well, I once ran a 12-minute 5K or so, and like, you have no idea who these people are. They're just, spouting out things like they're authorities. And it's one of the circles of Dante's Inferno, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, no, absolutely. And clearly some of these guys are like, who were talking a good game, or using mom's iPad in her basement, and it's absolutely out of control.
But then there's a few people that actually weighed in there, like me, Camille, Sage Kennedy. They'll go in there under their own name, and they'll take the bait, and then that just makes it worse.
Yep, and it sets them up as targets for others, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, I've spent that kind of soured me. And then, of course, whenever I posted, I'd get, once the website was up, and I hate when people share my article on Let's Run. I can say it a million times. It doesn't do anything for my site. It doesn't give me, make me hundreds of thousands of dollars. It doesn't add much traffic. But I hate when people put that on there, because I know it's going to be, they always accuse the person who posted my article of being me.
Of being you. Yep, I say it all the time. One of the few smart things I've ever done was after Kit Fox wrote the piece about me in Runner's World, was I stayed away from Let's Run, because I know there was a thread about it, and a couple of my runners were like sort of keeping track. They're like, okay, you got 60% positive, 40 negative, whatever. But I made a point of promising myself that I would not read the thread, because I was just gonna, I'd be apoplectic.
Yeah, I learned not to care, but every now and then I'll hop into one, and one will get me. I start typing, then I'm just going to stop it. Yeah, so that's kind of soured me. And again, if there's good debate to be had, I'll kind of hop in there and answer, and just ignore all the rest. And it's probably literally one or two guys. There's one person I know, who he is actually, because he's commented on the Runner's World article, online, and messaged me. It's the same, and little troll. I'll debate anybody. That's what I mean. Scott's my co-host, and we argue all the time. But he has valid points. He's sincere. It's just the trolling where it's where it's out of control. So so that soured me. I did spend a lot of time on there during the Rob Young stuff, and that was probably just pretty much the extent of it. Occasionally I'll say, okay, yeah, some people come from Let's Run. Let me see what got written. Go on there and be done. So
no, but I mean, just going back to the Rossi thing. I mean, yeah, the fact that he was so aggressive towards some of the people who basically were just pointing out facts, and I mean, there was another one where I think a lot of these guys too, they have the same tactic of sending out. There must be some like cheater's form letter or something. Like there's one who I wrote about a while back. Who got a lot of attention on the slow twitch message boards, which is a little heavier on triathletes and stuff, and who seemed to have a history of some not so kosher maneuvers in races. And I wrote about him on my blog at the time, and within a half an hour, I had an email ostensibly from his lawyer, and when another half hour later, I got an email from someone else saying, "Oh, you're going to get one of the fake letters from his lawyer. Do a LexisNexis search." And sure enough, there was no such lawyer. It was just him, and it was full of typos, and it was ridiculous. And it was clear it wasn't from a lawyer, but that's their thing. It's just like let's draw up a fake letter from a lawyer saying that I'm going to sue you, and instead of. Again, it's this phenomenon of doubling down, of being aggressive rather than, rather than being apologetic.
Yeah, it's shockingly, I've never got a lawyer letter. I've
got enough. I can send you some.
It's got the lawyer. You can send me one. But I thought for sure. I mean, I wrote about Larry Macon. And he threatens to sue everybody. I never got a letter from him. The one that follows that same exact pattern was when I wrote about Marlon. He was the running coach who cut the course at New Jersey, and I reached out to him and said, "Hey, can you prove you're capable these times?" He's a coach, and he'd run with his runners. I'm like, all right, maybe there's something, And again, since he was a running coach, I knew that would affect his business if I wrote about him. But again, I felt it was worthy, so I, gave him an opportunity, and he immediately sent me some bogus Garmin data. Again, just manually changed the total time, and
I remember that one.
And then, so I said, "Hey, I think you cheated." I talked to my lawyer, and he said, it was like within half minutes from initial context, he's already talked to a lawyer, and he's ready to, and never heard from him again. And it's funny, it took about 2 years, but they did finally disqualify him from the race. I think they changed ownership and whatnot, so I had reposted an article, and they eventually did disqualify him. But speaking of that, I know, being in New York, which is, running club heavy, and you've known or known of a lot of the people that I've written about, and have you ever had on your team anybody that's that you had to deal with cheating, as far as actually on somebody on your team that you had to do, or do they all know if you're their coach, you better not cheat?
It's an interesting question, and it's one that I struggled with. There was a case a while back of something that caught my attention, and independently of it sort of, getting my attention, I got a couple of notes from other people who were looking at it and, wrote to me and said, "Hey, coach, something's not right here." Thankfully, and I was really, it put me in a very strange position because I always want to be an advocate for my runners. And on the other hand, I'm also an advocate for fairness, and so it put me in a very strange position, and I really struggled with how to handle it. Thankfully, shortly after that particular race, the runner in question left our team without my having to ask. So at that point, and maybe it's a cop out on my part, but it let me just sort of look the other way at that point. It still left a sour taste, and it hasn't been a great thing, but, and again, maybe it's a cop-out, but for me, once I said, okay, the runner's no longer on the team, not representing the team, I'm not representing the runner, but yeah, it was an awkward situation.
Yeah, the confrontation, that's the worst part of this, for me. I like you, there's somewhat of a challenge, and it's solving a puzzle to figure out how somebody cheated. Like, you look at the results, I know they cheated, and when it's not, when you have to really dig to figure out how they do it, when you get that answer, there's definitely satisfaction to that. But the part I hate is writing the articles and the confrontations, which inevitably ensue. Whether I get a hold of the runner beforehand, or if I hear from them after, and you hate that because you know what you're gonna get. You can get the excuses, and
Right.
eventually, and you're gonna feel empathy for them, whether they deserve it or not. I feel empathy for Anita Carcone, and she, most despicable things came out on that Facebook page and others. But when I talk to them, it's like, oh yeah, I feel, I get it. So it's so that's the hardest part. So I could see why, if you're giving it out, you're going to take it, and not want to have to deal with that. So I do understand that. And then the next thing I want to talk to you about was you've been anti-cheating, this is a Runner's World article that came out about a couple weeks ago regarding banditing and kind of the how-to guide on how to bandit. Don't bandit, but if you're, but here's how to do it without being an a-hole type thing. Did you follow that? Have you talk to your runners about, banditing? Because I've come across a lot of run clubs and running groups who seem to encourage the behavior, especially in New York City, for whatever reason.
And it's interesting. And yes, I did follow it to a certain extent, maybe not as closely as others. And it's an interesting phenomenon because, look, there were years. Look, Boston obviously used to have their own, basically almost a separate start for the bandits, and they certainly, beyond looking the other way, they just sort of said, okay, if you're going to do it, here's how to do it. Excuse me. And obviously that was pre-bombing and everything. But I mean, not that many years ago. I mean, I remember Mary Wittenberg talking when she was in charge of the New York Roadrunners, talking about the same thing, basically, how to bandit. And if you want to run with a friend, here's how you do it. Here's and she would say, just make sure you don't do this, you don't do that. So the same kind of thing as that Runner's World piece was. But that was several years ago, probably 10 years ago, whatever. And my sense, and again, in the interest of full disclosure, I know Jeff Dengate from Runner's World, and he and I are, friendly enough, and he's a nice guy. So, I mean, I'm sort of loath to criticize because I do like him, but my sense is that was just, at least my interpretation, maybe I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, was meant more tongue-in-cheek than it came out. And look, even the title of here's how you do it, without being an a-hole. But I think my sense is the intent was to be kind of funny and satirical, and the execution left something to be desired. And there's all sorts of analogous search. Well, if you're going to steal this magazine, here's how to do it and not be I think my guess is in hindsight, they wish they hadn't done that. And maybe that was more appropriate for a satirical website or something like that.
Didn't they double down on it though?
Yeah, he really did, and because in the debates on Twitter, it's he didn't really give. It's like, hey, why does everyone care about this? There's much more important problems. Kind of like Bill did to us, and talking about the earthquakes. Why aren't we talking about that? But, right. But
yes, they're clearly there's always going to be something more important. I'm not sure that's ever a particularly valid argument, but.
Yeah, so he kind of that, and I've talked to him. I'm hopeful that we're going to get him on. We're talking to Bart, and he came out very hard against the article, and so I'd like to get Jeff on to, just discuss, debate it, and I don't think it'll be it won't be like we won't be getting screamed at screaming at each other for an hour straight. But again, I think you had the point exactly. I don't think it was meant to make more people bandit, but given the readership and people who look to Runner's World for advice, it's.
No, absolutely, and I'm certainly not trying to defend the piece. I'm just, I guess the positive spin to put on it was, like I said, either it was an attempt at humor, or if he's, if in fact you're saying that he wasn't using that, then maybe it was sort of, okay, you know what, we're accepting there are going to be certain people who do this, and let's at least make sure they know, okay, you shouldn't be doing this, but you really shouldn't be taking the Gatorade. You really shouldn't be taking the gels and stopping in the porta potties and all those types of things. But I'm trying to put a positive spin on it, partially because I like Jeff. But it was not certainly something that sat well with me.
Yeah, definitely not with race directors and whatnot.
Of course.
And I'm in some event groups and whatnot, and they're saying they're talking to him, they're not going to advertise, pulling advertising and all that. So yes, it definitely strikes a chord with them for whatever reason. So yes, I was surprised they didn't maybe back off on it a little bit, or or do kind of a follow up on it, because in the past they've written very good articles about why you should never bandit a race, and they did it. That was in response to when I wrote about Kelly Roberts, when she recently had, I say recently, it's been over a year now, and I'm kind of done, like with Mike Rossi. I don't want to keep on throwing her under the bus either, but but she entered a couple there's a couple of races where she was pacing friends, or friends were actually kind of pacing her, and it was after she supposedly learned her lesson for banditing, when she became, run selfie repeat and that whole thing. Yeah,
she became famous.
So I'm pretty sure she already had known better, but Runner's World did a great follow-up. Hey, here's why you should never ever do this. And so that one was, that was fine. And they, wrote the one about Boston and why it's not okay, the article by Dave. So it's, so this one was kind of the opposite of that, and kind of, backed off that a little bit. And I could see it being used as a justification from some, but we had a whole discussion on banditing with Frank Ruiz at Miami Marathon. He takes the video.
Yeah, I love it.
They pull him into the video. He did it the past couple of years, I believe. So he'll probably do it again this year. Or I think last year I had video from somebody else of him doing it. So yes, I think he's going to get a whole cheering gallery there with him, as he does that. But again, just kind of as a deterrent.
Yeah, no, but that's that's an example. I love that people have really gotten behind him on that, and I think that's because I think sometimes, in the past when I was, before I sort of handed things off very happily to you, and because you do it on a bigger scale and more thoroughly than I, but a lot of times there was this sort of, oh well, who the hell cares? Why, who appointed you judge, jury, and executioner, and all this stuff, and this backlash. So yeah, when you see a race director who is taking it that seriously and is, refusing medals to folks and those types of things, I love that he's getting kudos for that. I love that he's getting support for that, and that it's not just him, that other people are then sort of helping him out. And, I always used to joke when, like in New York City, the most common way to, and I think it's happening less now because they're advertising the mats every mile, but the most common thing in New York in the New York City Marathon is people would get off the Queensboro Bridge at mile 16, and rather than running all the way up First Avenue into the Bronx, down Fifth Avenue into Central Park, they would cut straight across 59th Street and go straight over to Central Park and cut out those pesky, 8 or 9 miles. And I always used to joke with folks that we should just set up like bandit cams on the cross street, so that for the people who took that shortcut, they're going to just cut across, and you just set up cameras between First and Second Avenue. And I said it one time jokingly, and a bunch of folks said, "Oh, let me know. I'll set it up. We'll do it. It'll be great." And then, in my, sort of category of bizarre fantasies is I would love for roadrunners, forget having the hidden mats elsewhere, put the mats between First and Second Avenue. And as soon as someone goes to cut the course, if they trigger a mat, that would be pretty funny. But like I said, it was interesting to see that people, what a suggestion that I made tongue in cheek, people were saying, sign me up, I'll do it. So yeah, and then that down in Miami, people are really backing him on that. It's nice to see.
Yeah, he is a great guy. He does a ton for the community free run clubs. I think it's probably the largest in the world, and picking up the trash. And he does a lot for the community, so he's well respected there. And I think
as he should be
part of it. Yeah, he's one of my favorites, along with Eli at California International Marathon. But I partner with them, so I have to say that. But he's fantastic too.
Sure.
And that's a kind of a point to point. So the point to points are kind of harder to cut, but they also have a relay there, so you can hop on the bus and get to the line. So I'd like to see Matt's heading to the relay, to the relay buses. We see a lot of that. Or people run the first segment and they cut off and go to the finish line. They may just be going to the finishing area, not intending to cheat, whatever. But you get a lot of that, especially on the point to points. That's usually taking the subway route, the Rosie Ruiz type thing. So
yeah,
that's the one that fascinated me. The Kip Litton's Boston result. I can't figure that one out.
I have no idea.
I know he can't. I know he couldn't run under 3 hours. I'm sure of it, but it's one of those. I mean, the result itself wouldn't have raised an eyebrow if it was anybody else. So
yeah, he's one of those people you just sort of hope, like, on his deathbed, that he just says, "Okay, here's what I did," just because it is so. I mean, he was good at it. I mean, I hate to give him credit for it, but and also, I mean, just to me, the most bizarre one is I forget where it was, the West Wyoming, the one where he made up a race and registered a URL, put up a website, posted fake results. I mean, that's a real commitment to your craft.
He set up on Marathon Guide and did reviews.
Yeah.
And
no. He, like I said, I mean, I'm not trying to. I don't mean to give the man kudos, but that dedication, that commitment. I mean, it's the sort of George Costanza, it's not a lie if you really believe it kind of thing. Like, that he would go that deep into it is almost admirable in a bizarre way. Yeah,
it's really nuts. And I've tried to, get a hold of him. I think he has about 2 followers on Twitter for his dental practice. I'm probably one of them, or maybe I unfollowed at some point. He's never on there anymore. Occasionally I'll, shoot him a message and say, hey, to talk again. I'm not going to re-rip him the guy. I just want to know how he did it. But it's, at this point, I guess, why really, from his standpoint, why would he want to bring that back up? And, but he's fascinating. The motivation with, Larry Macon and Parvena, that's, some of them are just, it's just, they go above and beyond. I mean, the whole world record, marathon counts, that whole community, and that whole thing, opens up a whole other can of worms. And even with Maniacs, it's kind of gets me looking more at the runners who cheated to get a 6-hour marathon because it's their 50th state kind of thing. It's like I never thought I'd be looking at those, but I get reports on, hey, this woman cheated at Marine Corps Marathon. She went from 18-minute pace to 15-minute pace.
Right, yeah, or the ones who defy the immutable laws of physics and are doing 2 races at the same time in different places,
Well, he gets early starts. And that's the answer. Larry. Yeah, it's like there's no way, possibly that our Parvena running Badwater. There's no way. So, so that's all very interesting. Hey, one more thing I wanted to ask you about: Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Oh yeah.
I was reading the article on Runner's World. You won the $1 million. You won, what was it?
I won $16,750, which, by the way, I mean, it was, first of all, it's the best payday I ever. I played very conservatively. There was nothing remarkable about my appearance, but I will say that one of the cheaters, the one who I mentioned who got so much attention on Slow Twitch, was also on Millionaire after the event. And I just happened to be flipping on one day and saw him, and I couldn't believe it was him. And I made more money than he did. So I have some pride in that. I beat the cheater, on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But yeah, that was a fun day. It was terrifying though. It was, I always refer to it as being like every first date and every final exam I ever took all rolled up into one. It was nerve-wracking, but yeah, I never made $16,000 in a day, and I doubt that I ever will again. So, and it was something I tried. I started trying to get on that show in 1999, and I would pass the written exam, then they did like a random drawing, and I didn't get on. And then I would, a couple of times I didn't pass the written exam, and then finally, I said, all right, we're going to give it one more shot. And I passed the written, I passed the screen test, and so it was a fun day.
So was it like the Meredith Vieira version, or was it the prime time?
No, it was Cedric the Entertainer was the host, so it was the year after Meredith left.
Nice.
And he was awesome. Because look, obviously he does these things, and I'm he saw a lot of people, and it was very clear he saw how. I mean, I joke about it, but he saw how nervous I was, and he, when I just came out, he just sort of put his arm around me for a second, and then it was horrifying because the first question, and they sort of they coach you a little bit in advance, and they say if you're going to ask the audience, don't ask them a quantum physics question. Ask them a pop culture question. Do something. Make sure that it's going to be something where they're going to be of some value. And actually, the first question they asked was one where I was lost, and it was a hip hop question. And I actually thought I knew, but there was no way I was going out on the first question. I was not going to be that guy. So I said, you know what? I'll swallow my pride. I'll ask the audience. And he very quietly, under his breath, after I said, definitely asking the audience, and they're pressing their buttons and everything, he very quietly just came up to me and said, "It's a young crowd, they'll help you." And it was just that little, which probably, just enough, okay, calm the hell down, you're going to be fine, get through the first one. And I did, and then I got through a few more, and thankfully they asked me a math question, which was to my liking, and especially with my math teacher wife in the audience. So yeah, it was very much out of my comfort zone, but yeah, it was a great day.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I'd like to be just on Deal or No Deal. You don't really have to
think
in and just you should go home with something unless you're an idiot or you get to have the worst luck in the world. So that one could be for me, or whatever, the one with the balls dropping down, and that one looks pretty. That one seems pretty good. But if I had to kind of think and do math under that pressure, I'd probably fail miserably.
It really is remarkable too, because I got to tell you, sitting on the couch, I'm a genius. Like, I watch that show and I'm picking off the answers left. I know everything on the couch. Those lights come on, they play that music. You realize it's real money. Like, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, you know what, $33,000, but I'm not sure, but yeah, let's go for it. When it's real money, it's a very different game. And I told him at one point, I said to him, at this stage, you could ask me to spell cat, and you could spot me the C and the A, and I might ask to use a lifeline. There was no way I was going out by getting a question wrong. And again, I walked away. I was fairly conservative with it, but yeah, like, it was a nice payday.
So was there a question? I remember how it played. Was there a question that you just bailed on?
It was something. Yeah, I was out of lifelines, and they asked the question. I forget the exact quote, but yeah, they asked the question, and and who is this quote attributed to? And I didn't know, and I wasn't going to. I was able to narrow it down to two, but again, so if we're sitting around and we're playing for nickels, I'll what the heck, I'll go for it. I'll flip a coin. But yeah, with $33,000 on the table and the opportunity to walk away with half of it. Which is what I did. I said, I don't know. You walk away with half of it, or you go for it. And yeah, I could have made more money or gone down to 1,000. So yeah, I forget. I'd probably blocked the quote out of my mind, but it was.
You should totally know what that is, by the way.
Yeah, like I said, I could tell you all the ones I got right. I blocked out all the ones that I didn't know.
No, that's cool. I wanted to ask about that because that's everyone's dream is to go on there and make $1 million or whatever. In a day's work, and it's not bad making $16,000 a day.
I wouldn't mind making $16,000.
No, exactly. I'll take that. These days I'll take $1,000.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Is I realized that $16,000 is sure as heck not a bad payday for a running coach, and also the point I always make is that and Derek, I think even just, in your analysis of all these things, I think you and I have talked before about sort of, when we're looking for cheaters and you're looking through results, there's a certain rush out of just sort of trying to figure it out, not trying to embarrass anyone, but just figuring things out and almost sort of playing the game. And, there were, I think, 8 other people in the green room with me. And I will tell you without any false modesty, the large majority of them were smarter than I am. They were clearly smarter people. These were Jeopardy veterans. These were really smart people. Yet I made more money than most of them because they got excited and they would go one step too far and they would go from $50,000 to 1,000. Or they would just get sloppy and answer a question too quickly and lose. So I felt like, at least, I played the game right. I didn't show myself to be a particularly an overly intelligent person, but I showed myself to be a good game player. And again, it's the same kind of thing. Like when I'm going through, even when Kit Fox interviewed me for the Runner's World piece, we're sitting at my kitchen table, and he said, "How do you find one?" And I said, "Start the stopwatch. Let's go to Rock and Roll Vegas. Let's see how fast I can find one."
Oh, well, you picked an easy one.
Well, yeah, you start off easy. It's just like the game show. But then I also said, Staten Island happened. This was also back when, New York Roadrunners, when they still had the faster seeded runners with the lower numbers. So I'm like, okay, let's scroll through the first 50 and look for the first 4-digit bib number. That's going to be a bib swap in all probability, and sure as heck it was. So yeah, it's just sort of playing the game, and the challenge of sort of finding them is kind of the fun part at times.
Yeah, I did notice in that article that he used the term bib mule, and I'm like, boy, that became attributed to me. That I think Kit probably originated that term, or maybe you did. I'm not sure.
I think I probably used it to him, but I don't think I can take credit for you. I'm not even sure where I got it from, but
that's perfect.
But yeah, but that was definitely, just showing him the process was kind of fun, and it was, and that was a lot of what we talked about, and what I'm still fascinated, just to sort of go full circle on this conversation, is just sort of that some organizations don't care. And look, I've gotten, I remember a couple of times getting tweets from race organizations, including New York Roadrunners. So I like, and I've got a good relationship with them, but there was one time they said, I pointed out one cheater, but I tweeted it. And I said something about there's really suspect, results in such and such an age group. And they wrote and they tweeted back and they said, hey, if you notice anything, could you please let us know? And my response was, well, but isn't that your job? And if I can do it in a very unsophisticated manner in a minute or two, I can find a couple of cheaters. Isn't that your responsibility? And shouldn't you, and you've got a database of all your results. You can sort by predicted time, look for the differential between predicted time and actual time, and at least red flag any real outliers. And isn't that really what you're supposed to be doing? So that's why, and that was some of the backlash I got from the Runner's World piece, was people saying, well, why aren't you calling people out? And part of it is I'm tired of getting, nasty emails and fake lawyers' letters. But part of it is sort of like, I will advocate for, if one of my athletes gets cheated out of a place, yes, I'm going to speak up because I'm their advocate. But otherwise, what I try and do is occasionally shine a light on it in the hopes that the organizations will take a closer look at things. Because I don't think it's, they've got people that they're paying who could do that. And I'm not lobbying for them to hire me or pay me to do it. I just think it's their responsibility. And I would hope to sometimes sort of gently nudge them in that direction.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great approach and alternate approach from what I kind of Forrest Gump to my way into doing what I'm doing. But
hey, but you're doing it well, and you're, and so, and I certainly see no reason why you shouldn't be. I mean, in my case, it's also, I remember sitting here with Kit from Runner's World in my living room, and I said to him at one point, I said, you know what? I paid off all those grad school loans for my master's degree in exercise physiology so I could become a good coach. And I'm sitting here talking to you about cheaters. That's not like, I always wanted to be in Runner's World. I didn't want to be in Runner's World for this. I wanted to be in Runner's World because I turned into a good coach. So that's why I think at times, I joke about not wanting to get the hate mail, but at times also, like, I don't want to be that coach. I want to be the coach who advocates and protects his runners, but I don't want to be the coach who is necessarily the guy who's, known for running after, going after cheaters.
When you found the people in the past, when you were doing this, did you have concerns about the social media backlash or the backlash generally against these people? Because that's kind of where me and Derek have had our disagreements, is, just basically about the, how the greater internet treats these cheaters, and, the harm that it could cause.
It is definitely a concern. It's something where, the first time I wrote about this was, actually, this is telling me how far backwards going. The first one I wrote about was just on my blog, and I think it was certainly before I was on Facebook, and I've been on there for 10 years, so we're definitely going back a ways. And at first I published the woman's name, and I later redacted it because, she was an individual. She wasn't, and I know Derek's policy is more sort of, if it's a high profile person, if it's someone who makes their living, and I understand that. This was a person, and it's an individual who, I suspect made a really stupid decision to turn around before the mat, and before the designated turnaround point, and cut the course, and clearly some people noticed it because I got nasty emails and posts and messages on my blog. How dare you, question her integrity? She's a wonderful person. She raises money for charity, all these things. And I wrote back. I said, that's fine. She raises money for charity, and she's maybe a wonderful person. She may be a good friend, but she clearly cheated. But with things, where it can so easily go viral via social media, via Let's Run, those types of things, all the more reason why just I personally try and avoid doing this. And even the only one that I've done in the last few years, and again, sort of, it's nice. Derek, you've sort of done me a service by not only filling the void, but doing it on a bigger and better scale than I ever did and could. But there was one that I wrote about a while back where a couple of folks, it was a local race, the Brooklyn half, and a couple of folks wrote to me and said, hey, did you see this? And the two runners who got cheated. And I said, oh, yeah, well, that's so obvious. He's going to get the guy who, ostensibly won it, the age group, is clearly going to get disqualified. And, I mean, he missed multiple mats. He went from, his pace went down by a minute a mile during that missing time. His average pace was faster for 13 miles than he had run in the Fifth Avenue mile. So it was obvious. So I said, you know what, I'm going to stay out of this, guys. And then Roadrunners refused to even look at it. And then the guy's team for a while refused to look at it. So then then I wrote something about it. And within a few minutes of posting it, the runners team responded on the blog, excuse me, and said, we're aware of it. The runner is no longer on our team, and we have asked Roadrunners to remove him from our team results. So that was one where I felt. Yet I never mentioned him by name, but I made it very obvious to the teams and to Roadrunners. So the people who needed to know knew. The people who didn't.
Very, very good. And I think that's, I've kind of been gradually kind of going in, more in that direction, especially for and I've been that way for the one-time cheaters. If it's someone I'm going to profile individually, usually even then there's it's repeated, it's age groups, it's definitely again not going to be the one-time person. Cut the math, and I'm going to profile or put anything out there where they can be identified, or I would hope that they'd be able to be identified by the general public. So so I've gotten more conservative as it goes on. So I definitely appreciate that. I see that argument, and occasionally I'll write something and I'll see it real ugly, and it's like, it's you realize more and more as you talk to more of the people. They are human.
Well, and at the same time,
I try to pick my spots better, but I'm not always, I don't always pick the right spots, I guess.
Well, at the same time, it's astonishing to me that some of these people, like the girl that we just kind of caught in my running group, they're still out there, just brashly talking about their greatness and their accomplishments, and it's just like that girl, she got caught, they changed her result, everybody in the community knows, and she's still all over social media talking about what she did. And it's it's hard not to it's for someone that does that, you kind of think, well, they deserve to be outed. But at the same time, once that social media outrage reaches like the 9,000th person that says that they should die, you're like, ugh, what did I cause?
Yeah, that was like with the Jane Seau case. That I wrote about that way. And again, I didn't name her. I didn't talk about her. I didn't talk about where she went to school. I didn't talk about who she wrote for and all that. But that's what got. And that, I took a picture of her watch showing less, 11.65 miles instead of 13.1, and she faked her GPS data after the race. So there was so much there, but that just, that was to that point. It went so nuts. I'm like, I thought I was kind of, my thinking was, okay, if I don't put her name up there, someone Googles her name, it's not going to be associated with cheating. People might know who she is, and if there's a screenshot with her name, well, that's not really the same because, again, Google's not going to pick that up, but when the New York Times picks it up, there's nothing.
I remember, you and I talked about
it's like,
that.
Okay, but that was kind of, I think, when Scott and I, that's when we first talked, but shortly after that, and we talked about that. It's like, who's, who bears any responsibility there? And again, at some point, probably 2 weeks after it, Inside Edition wanted to, go on TV and talk about her. I'm like, nah, that would be good publicity for my site, but that was probably the first time where it's like, okay, I turned down publicity for my site because this person's been through enough.
Absolutely. And I remember at the time you and I talked about it, and you went out of your way not to name her, but unfortunately for her, she was high profile enough that a lot of people realized what happened and who she was, and look, and here's a woman who, she obviously cheated. She then threw the timer under the bus, and so she made multiple layers of mistakes, but still the level of venom that was directed at her was quite alarming.
And she went out and tried to cover it up by making a fake.
I say it wasn't just a spur of the moment mistake. She cheated. She then tried to cover it up she then basically, criticized the timing company and blamed them. So no, I mean, far be it from me to defend her, because there were, like I said, it wasn't a spur of the moment thing. It was calculated. It was, maybe the initial thing was spur of the moment, but after that there were she kept, I keep using the phrase doubling down. She doubled down, right. But even with that said, some of the things that were being said about her, it got so out of control and so ridiculous that.
No, it absolutely did.
And she could have
just was tweeting at her. I mean, it was really surreal for me. And that's that's the only one that went that viral. I Run Gia Run right before that Runner's World article. That one, got attention. But this one was just, I couldn't believe it. It's one of those,
So if you're a cheater out there,
I couldn't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's like it was out there, and you can't take it back if you wanted to.
No, and I know, Derek. I mean, you and I have talked in the past, and I'm certainly not naming names, but there have been some that you've handled very discreetly and talked to people, and especially when the people are apologetic and admit to what happened. I know you've gone out of your way to either not write about them or to very carefully protect their identity. So, I know that's something.
Case,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect example. Yes, that was something where you and I talked about that one, and that was an example for an opportunity for you to talk about what happened and sort of the reasoning behind it, but you were very careful not to tip your hands at all about what happened or who she is.
And it's funny. I think it was in the Marathon. The article was shared in Marathon Maniacs. Either I shared it or someone did, but man, somebody was ripping on me for protecting her. It's like, I mean, there's so many reasons that, people don't know about individual cases and stuff. It's like, just rip them. I can find out who she is. I'm going to find out who she is. And I'm going to out her. I'm just like, I mean, when I name people, I'll get it. Even when I don't name people, you get at the one end of the spectrum. Like, okay, what? I mean, generally, for the average, person who's not gaining something tangible or taking something away from something tangible, by naming them, what are you doing? And I was convinced. I knew she was done cheating. I knew that was done.
Right.
If it wasn't done, then or if she had taken that result that she said she was going to disqualify herself from and enter Boston with it, then it might have been different. But
sure.
But I was convinced. Okay, that not like with Kelly Agnew, the ultra runner who hid in the porta potty. He was cheating for years, and he was winning races, and he's still the most astonishing to me because I don't see how you run a mile loop with these people and knowing you're directly cheating those people that you face dozens of times during a race over multiple years. But he was disqualified before, and there were rumblings among some people that knew, but he kept on doing it even after disqualification. So until he was publicized, it continued, and it probably would have still continued. So that's that's my motivation. But there's definitely times where it's better just to back off. And there's cases that Scott's been aware of in the ultra community where I could have written articles and and we didn't. It got resolved, and it's like, all right, what's really the purpose of this?
But the moral of the story is if you cheat and someone catches you and they got you, just come clean, and then everybody will leave you alone.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Or look, a whole lot more once it's out there. Just admit it. People it'll slow down considerably. So, hey, with that, Jonathan, I'll give you a chance to kind of plug Twitter, your running club website, whatever you want to announce to people if they want to find you, if they want to
sure,
coach you, but don't report cheaters to him. He doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah, please. We're done with that. Unless you get one of my guys. Our company's City Coach Multisport. We coach runners and triathletes, some in New York, but plenty of athletes virtually throughout the country. You can get us at citycoach.org. On Twitter, I'm Real Coach Kane because someone with 6 followers still has 6 years, hasn't tweeted in 5 years, but I digress. So on Twitter I'm Real Coach Kane. On Facebook and Instagram I am Coach Kane, and love to hear from folks. At me anytime. I always like talking to folks out there.
Again, thanks very much for coming on, Scott. What do you plug in? Talk about your races.
We just opened up registration for our race. This is my race directing debut. It's the Badger Trail races on a really beautiful, flat, soft rail trail in southwest Wisconsin. We have a 100-mile, 50, 100-mile, 100K, 50-mile, 50K marathon and half marathon, and you go through a quarter-mile tunnel. It's a 130-year-old tunnel, and it curves a little, so when you get in the middle, you can't see anything. So it's going to be really fun. It goes through some small communities. There's going to be beer. There's going to be fun. So check it out. It's called the Badger Trail Races by 10 Junk Miles, or just go to www.10junkmiles.com, and there's a link there that says TJM Racing.
Very good. And with Marathon Investigation, you can support the podcast by going to Patreon, Marathon Investigation, and you can get access to bonus episodes. We'll be talking more about the case with Anita and Bill. We'll be talking about more of that in bonus episode. Occasionally I may just want to get on and talk, and I'll do that and throw that up there. So get a little bit extra content while helping myself and Scott and helping support the podcast. And of course it's marathoninvestigation.com. Scott, you can find his podcasts at 10junkmiles.com.
Thank you for listening to the Marathon Investigation Podcast. Have a questionable result to report? Visit marathoninvestigation.com to contact us, or email Derek at results@marathoninvestigation.com.
Another case closed for the Marathon's silent guardian.